Hello everyone, my name is Sohni Siddiqui and I am a PhD scholar at the Technical University of Berlin. As a first step, I would like to thank 4th Paris International Conference on Social Science and Humanities for accepting my research for presentation. This presentation is part of my PhD thesis where I am working to develop an anti-bullying intervention designed for the professional development of teachers. This intervention is called Savanjana Anti-Bullying Intervention, and this presentation is based on the results of the survey we conducted before designing this intervention. The topic of my today's presentation is bullying prevalence in Pakistan's educational institutes and recommendations for tailored intervention, preclusion to the framework for teacher-led anti-bullying intervention. So I have already introduced myself. My name is Sohni Siddiqui or Sohni Zahid Siddiqui, and I'm a PhD scholar at Technical University of Berlin. And this project is supervised by Dr. Anya Schulz-Krambus, who is also an author of this presentation, and she is helping me to develop this intervention design. She is a department head at Education Psychology Technical University of Berlin. So let's quickly go through the contents of the presentation. I will start with the introduction. After that, I'm just going to briefly introduce what basically bullying is, how can we define bullying, and what are the different forms of the bullying. Then we are going to just look at the literature review. Then I'm going to show what were the results of the baseline need assessment, or what were the results of the study I conducted before starting designing this intervention design. And after that, I will be discussing recommendations based on the results, and at last there will be a small overview of the strength and limitation of this study. So let's start with the introduction of the presentation. So as I have already explained you that this paper or this presentation is basically a baseline need assessment that we did before designing anti-bullying intervention for teachers in Pakistan. The main purpose of this baseline need assessment was to find out the stratum of traditional bullying and cyberbullying and their consequences in Pakistan education system. I also want to mention that the strength of this baseline survey was that the data was collected from teachers instead of the students, as most of the previous researchers did. So which enabled researchers to identify perceptions and experience of teachers in education settings, as well as what they are expecting from the anti-bullying intervention that we are designing for them. So this baseline need assessment is basically to highlight all the results that help us to identify where more focus is needed and what the teachers are expecting from this anti-bullying intervention. So let's start with the basic concept of the bullying. Bullying is basically an aggressive behavior with repeated intentions to afflict individuals with physical, emotional, and mental means, and is usually resulted from power imbalance. Remember one thing, that in power imbalance means that there is always a difference of power between a bullying perpetrator and a victimized child. This power imbalance can be in the form of the physical strength. It can be in the form of the social acceptance or financial situation. So remember one thing, that always the perpetrator is stronger than a victimized child, and that's why we normally recommend or use the word power imbalance to show the difference between a perpetrator and a victimized student or child. So bullying is further divided or classified into traditional bullying. Traditional bullying can be in the form of the physical bullying, hitting, kicking, tripping, or even destroying someone's properties under the category of physical bullying. The another traditional form of the bullying is verbal bullying, which refers towards the use of the abusive language or mimicking unkindly towards anyone, or using a slang language. It's all up under the category of verbal bullying. There is one other form of the bullying, we call it emotional or social bullying, and this type of a bullying is common whenever a perpetrator is not ready to reveal his identity. In this type of the bullying, usually the main purpose is to spoil the reputation of the student or a child, and it is usually done by spreading rumors about the child, by spreading lies about the child. So traditional bullying can be in the form of the physical, verbal, or emotional bullying. However, cyberbullying can be in the form of the verbal bullying or emotional bullying. So let's just quickly go through that what the review of the literature is saying. Remember one thing, that in this review we are going to talk about the status of the bullying and cyberbullying in Pakistan, but all these studies were conducted are based on the self-reports, and the data was collected from the students. So in most of the study, it has already been identified that bullying and cyberbullying are routine practices in Pakistan education institutions and have affected the physical, emotional, and mental health of the students. It is also recommended by many researchers to build support centers in academic settings to deal with the bullying and cyberbullying situation and to implement anti-bullying intervention. It is very important to understand that interventions which are designed to control the cyberbullying and its consequences are substandard so far in Pakistan's context. So there is a need that some anti-bullying intervention should be designed to control the bullying, traditional bullying and cyberbullying in Pakistan education institutions. So now we're going to talk about the research methodology. It is a quantitative study with a cross-sectional survey. Based on the cross-sectional survey, the instrument that we have used to get the information about the cyberbullying, social bullying, verbal bullying and physical bullying is actually the mix of the questionnaires which have taken from the different studies. For cyberbullying, we use a cyber victimization questionnaire. For social bullying, we use a questionnaire developed by our dog Ruo, and it was extracted from his thesis, from his PhD thesis. For verbal bullying, we took out the questions from Dogruer, Zhu et al. And Gonzalez, Carbera et al. Questionnaire. For physical bullying, the questions were taken from the Mare, Zhu and Gonzalez, Carbera et al. Research paper. In addition to that, we also asked some questions from the teachers to know about their opinion and what they're expecting from the anti-bullying intervention design. I also want to mention that a team of researchers, including the educationists and psychologists from Department of Education and Psychology at the Technical University of Berlin, reviewed and established the content validity of the questionnaires after these questions were adapted from various questionnaires. So content validity was also established before starting with the data collection process. Sample were the educators. Approximately 454 teachers responded to the questionnaire which was sent in the form of a Google Forms, and the sampling technique was a convenient sampling technique. Now, we're just quickly going to talk about the demographic of the participants. So most of the participants in this study were from the secondary education institutions or who were teaching the grades from 6 to 10 or O levels. So we have the 41% of the participants from the secondary level of education. When we discuss about the institutional settings, we found that approximately 80% of the teachers' education institutions were in urban cities, or you can say in metropolis cities. And when we asked about the institutional setting, that whether the school was a government-run public school or a private school, then we found that most of the teachers were from the private school sectors. Now, after finalizing and establishing content validity, we run the factor analysis for the questionnaire by using SPSS version 27 and MS version 24. And in the final questionnaire, we left with the 13 items for the cyberbullying, 9 items for the social bullying, 7 items for the verbal bullying, and 7 items for the physical bullying. And reliability and average variance extracted, which is used to establish the construct validity, was also in an acceptable range. We also check the model fitness criteria, and in this study, all the criteria for the model fitness were, or most of the model fitness criteria were met, and we can say that the model was fit to analyze and to test the hypothesis. Now I'm moving on towards the results of the baseline need assessment. So you can see from this graph, and it's indicated that most participants agreed that there is a prevalence of emotional and verbal bullying, which is inclined more towards the right hand side. You can see that. And which is inclined with the right hand side, and the teachers have encountered more social and verbal bullying incidents as compared to the physical and cyber bullying. So when we were matching it with the literature review, we found that in most of the studies where the data was collected from the students were reporting that the cyberbullying is also very common, as well as the traditional bullying is also very common. But when we get the data from the teachers, the cyberbullying, according to their opinion, the cyberbullying is not very common. So from here we concluded that might be the teachers are not experiencing it, or maybe they are unable to identify it, or maybe they are not very active on all the social media networks where the students are involved in the cyberbullying. So based on this assumption, or based on this conclusion, we finally decided that in our intervention design, the initial first 2 modules will only and only based on the identifications of the behaviors, where teachers will be trained to identify perpetrators' behaviors and victimized child behavior. We also have a Pearson correlation results, and from this Pearson correlation results, we found that whenever a level of teaching is increasing, the physical bullying is decreasing. It means that physical bullying is more prevalent in primary schools than in higher education institutions. The another conclusion was that wherever the cyberbullying was common, the verbal, physical, and emotional bullying was also common among those institutions. So based on this, we decided that our intervention design will have the components to handle or to encounter both cyberbullying and traditional bullying. One other question was that what is the most common network where the students are found in or involved in bullying. So according to the teachers in Pakistan, Facebook is still the most common or the most frequently used social networking platform where cyberbullying incidents are reported. On the second position was Instagram, and at third, TikTok was also considered as one of the common forum where cyberbullying cases are reported. At last, we also asked some questions about the teachers. So most of the teachers, approximately 55% of the teachers, wanted to have this anti-bullying intervention implementation in the physical form. They did not like the online training sessions. One other question was that if we are going to build an app for learning intervention design, approximately 54% of the teachers said that it will be a good idea that if there is some supporting app along with the training modules. One more question was that any preferences or reservation for instructors, gender, opposite or same. So most of the teachers say that they are equally comfortable if the gender is same or if the instructor is of the same gender or the different gender. But when it comes to the implementation, most of the teachers said that whenever they are going to apply their learning in their institutions and going to start talk about the anti-bullying interventions with their students, they would prefer boys and girls in a separate settings. The last question was that if we are going to add some verses from the Quran, or we are going to add some examples of the prophets, or we are going to add some stories from our cultural background, 74% of the teachers said that it will be a good idea that this intervention design should be aligned with the holy books or with the religious perspective of our country. Now I'm just moving on towards the last part of it, that what is the strength of the research study. As I've already mentioned, that it is not relying on the student self-report, rather the teachers were the main participants in the study. And one another important fact is that this study has provided a new perspective and general guidelines for planning and implementing new socially, culturally anti-bullying intervention for teachers in Pakistan. So the limitations and the direction for future research, it would be a great if the same study will be replicated where the additional educational stakeholders such as administrators, counselors and educational institution staff could also be the part of the study. One another important aspect is that it would be great if in the future studies, the translated version of the instruments should be used, because English is not very common in Pakistan, and especially when the teachers are reporting from rural areas, they have a problems to give the answers if the questionnaire is developed in English language. And one more last recommendation is that a same study should be replicated in a longitudinal study design instead of the cross-sectional design. So finally, the recommendations. So this new intervention is going to encounter both traditional and cyberbullying, and is integrated into the religious, cultural, and social norms of the society. And the creation of the app will also be considered when this intervention design is going to be developed. And the implementation of the separate program for the boys and girls is also recommended to ensure the open dialogue and discussion without hurting any community religious beliefs. So thank you so much for attending the session, and I'm looking forward for your question answers. Thank you so much.